Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning into this story. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. This is Riley Hart, former investigative reporter for the Daily Lantern. It's been almost a year and a half since society changed completely. I've lost count of the exact months. It's easier to track the passing of seasons than the calendar these days. My dog, Bailey, and I are traveling across these deserted stretches of farmland in search of any remaining survivors who might share their stories. This tape will be number 14 in my ongoing collection of accounts, an attempt to piece together how the world really fell apart and how those left behind are coping. I see a farmhouse in the distance. The fields around it look like they've been swallowed by weeds, though I can still spot the outlines of old road furrows. There's a dilapidated windmill leaning precariously near the barn, and something that might have been a silo off to the left. I've heard rumors that an older couple might still be living out here, clinging to whatever harvest they can manage. If they're willing to talk, maybe we can learn more about these quiet corners of the countryside. Bailey's ears just perked up. Guess she senses something, or maybe she smells the remnants of livestock. Time to get closer. The road leading to the farmhouse is overrun with tall grass and scattered debris. My boots crunch on broken glass from old headlights and fragments of rotted fence posts. I keep my voice low, partly out of habit. Speaking at a full volume never feels safe anymore. Bailey pads silently beside me. A rusted mailbox on a tilt reads Miller. The letters are chipped away, but I can still make them out. The property's entrance is marked by a sagging wooden gate, split in the middle. There's a narrow footpath leading around the side, with faint footprints pressed into the mud. Someone has passed here not too long ago, but it's impossible to say whether they came in peace or with desperate intentions. Despite the uncanny silence, there's a feeling of watchfulness in the air, as if every stray breeze might be carrying eyes with it. I grip my tape recorder carefully, balancing it in one hand while keeping the other near my bag of supplies. Bailey is tense, her nose lifted. She's my early warning system, my companion, and often the reason people hesitate before attacking. Drawing closer to the main house, I see a porch that's been roughly patched with mismatched boards. A single rocking chair, missing a leg, leans against the far railing. I raise a hand and knock on the door frame, since the door itself is propped open. No immediate answer. Hello? My voice echoes slightly. I'm Riley Hart. I'm just passing through. I have some supplies to offer if you're willing to share your story. Nothing. I knock again. Bailey's tail is rigid, and she emits a soft, low whine. Then from somewhere within the house, a shuffle and the muffled sound of a voice. Who's there? The words come out hoarse. I'm a former reporter, I reply, trying to keep my tone calm. I've been traveling for a while collecting testimonies, recordings, of how people survived after everything changed. I'm not a threat. I step back slowly, letting them see I'm not holding any weapons. Bailey, fortunately, is well trained enough to remain at a slight distance. After a long pause, an older man emerges. His hair is white and thinning, though he's solidly built. He carries himself with caution. Behind him, an older woman stands with a wary expression. Her hands tremble slightly, but whether that's from fear or age is impossible to tell. You got some food to spare? The man asks bluntly. I glance down at Bailey, then back at the pair. Yes, I can share a bit. Maybe a few cans of vegetables if that'll help. In exchange, all I want is to hear how you've managed out here. I record these stories for the future. Someone should remember how it all fell apart. The couple exchange a look. After a moment, the woman nods. Come in then. But mind your dog. We've had trouble with strangers who show up with hungry animals. She's safe, I assure them, giving Bailey a quick pat before leading her inside. The living area is small, cluttered with blankets and cans of food set on crates. The house smells of dust and old paper. A single lamp, powered by a small generator, flickers in the corner. There's a half wall leading to a kitchen, where I see pots stacked near a sink that apparently hasn't run for a while. "Name's Walter Miller," the man says, finally offering a cautious handshake. "This here's my wife, Helen. We've been trying to make do." "Riley Hart," I confirm. "Used to write for the Daily Lantern. Thanks for allowing me inside." I set my pack down on a battered coffee table, carefully unzipping it. I produce 2 small cans of creamed corn and a sealed pouch of dried fruit. That's about all I can spare at the moment. They take the offering with gratitude that barely masks their hunger. Helen gestures to a chair for me to sit. "We haven't seen many travelers come by lately. Not after everything that's happened. Your dog, she's not going to cause trouble, is she?" "Bailey's protective, but she's calm if we're safe," I explain. "She's been my one constant companion for months." With that settled, Walter clears his throat. "You want a story? We don't have anything too dramatic, no big revelations. But if you want to know how folks survive out here, we can tell you that." I hold up the cassette recorder, pressing the worn red record button. The tape wheels start spinning. "All right," I say quietly. "Let's start at the beginning. Could you please state your names and describe how you ended up staying here, even after the zombie outbreak made things so difficult?" Walter glances at Helen. She takes a breath, then speaks. "I'm Helen Miller, and this is Walter. We've owned this farm for over 30 years. Used to be a small-scale produce farm. Pumpkins, squash, tomatoes. We did a little business with a grocery distributor in town. It was never lucrative, but it kept us fed and the lights on." Walter picks up the thread. "When we first heard about the infection, we thought it'd blow over. Media sensationalism, you know. But one evening we watched the news in our living room. There were reporters standing outside overwhelmed hospitals, flights being cancelled, entire cities shutting down. The next week, everything just stopped." They share a meaningful look, and then Walter continues. "We had some cash in the bank, but that didn't matter after a while. The grocery stores were picked clean. Neighbors either fled or barricaded themselves in. We decided we'd stay, live off our land, and see what happened." I scribble a few notes in a small, tattered journal. "And how did that go at first?" Helen's eyes flick toward the window, as if the memories linger just outside. "At first, not so bad. We had seeds. We had a working generator that ran off a large supply of fuel we'd stored for our tractor. But we didn't anticipate how many people would be drawn to any place that had so much as a single tomato. Folks rolling in from the nearby highway, lost or desperate. We tried to help them at first, giving away what little produce we could spare." Walter lets out a weary sigh. "Yes, we helped them. But soon the crowds got bigger. Word must have spread. One morning we woke up and found half our crops trampled, livestock gone. That's when we realized we couldn't just be neighborly and expect no trouble." Helen's voice catches. "That was the day we built the barricade and started turning people away." I pause the recording for a moment to let them settle. "I'm sorry you had to go through that. If you're comfortable, I'd like to hear more. If it's too painful..." "It's all painful," Walter interjects. "But if you're trying to make a record, I suppose the truth needs to be known." He nods at my tape recorder, so I click it back on. Walter's tone becomes more reflective. "We tried to salvage what was left of our crops. We set up a schedule, guard the perimeter at night, tend the fields by day. We had a few neighbors who stuck around for a bit, but that didn't last. Some wanted to take our supplies and run. We had no choice but to keep to ourselves." Helen rubs her hands together, as if trying to warm them. "The worst was seeing those who needed help the most, families with hungry children, come knocking. We gave away more than we should have in the early weeks. By the time we realized how dire things were, we had too little left for ourselves." Walter's gaze drops. "That guilt, it sits heavy. We wanted to be good people, but if we gave everything away, we'd be in the same boat as those who had nothing. So we drew a line." Helen sighs softly. "We drew a line. And after that we locked down, cut ourselves off from the rest of the world. I wasn't sure we'd ever speak to strangers again. We'd see the infected passing by, sometimes just one or two at a time. They'd shuffle through the fields, but they never seemed to linger on the farmland for long. I leaned forward. You mentioned the infected. Did they overrun this area at any point, or are you relatively safe out here? Walter's jaw tightens. We had a close call about 6 months in. A group of them. Maybe they caught wind of movement or smelled something. They drifted in from the east. It was a slow wave of unsteady shapes at first. We barricaded the farmhouse doors, turned out every light, and hid in silence through the night. Helen's shoulders slump. They eventually moved on. It's not like in the city. Here, everything's wide open, and if there isn't obvious movement or noise, they don't keep interest. We considered ourselves lucky, but that event rattled us. We realized how alone we truly were. Bailey shifts at my feet, panting softly. She usually gets uneasy when she senses tension in the air. I glance around the living room. On the mantel, I spot a framed photograph, faded from sunlight but still clear enough to show a younger Walter and Helen with 2 teenage children. I hesitate to pry, but curiosity tugs at me. Walter notices where my gaze has landed. Our kids moved away long before all this happened. We haven't heard from them. We don't know if they're alive or... He swallows hard, leaving the rest unspoken. Helen's voice is quiet. We keep hoping one day they'll roll up that road, call out our names, say it's all just a nightmare. But hope doesn't pay the bills anymore. I switch off the recorder for a moment. I understand, I'm truly sorry. They nod, accepting the words, but unable to let go of the weight of the unknown. Outside, a breeze rattles the loose window panes. They invite me into the kitchen, where I see the remnants of a functional life. A sink lined with small clay pots, each containing a sprout or two. Helen has evidently been trying to grow herbs indoors, likely to supplement their meager diet. There's a single stovetop with wires trailing to a generator outside. No modern luxuries remain, just a battered tea kettle and some mismatched plates. We sit at the table. I offer them a little more food if they're willing to continue the interview. I can't spare much, but a small pouch of powdered milk and a half package of crackers might go a long way in these conditions. They accept, gratitude evident in their eyes. Walter coughs gently. Mind if I open the can of corn you gave us? It's been a while since we had anything fresh. Even if it's canned, it's a taste we've missed. Go ahead, I say, offering a small can opener from my pack. As he works at the can, I press the record button again, feeling that continuing their story now might reveal more of the slow, grinding reality they've faced. Helen speaks softly. It's the nights that get to me most. When darkness falls, I feel every creak, every rustle outside, and I imagine the worst. We've had confrontations we barely escaped. Walter sets the opened can of corn on the table and gently slides it toward Helen. We're not fighters. We've done what we had to do, but it's never been easy. I recall the rumors that some farmers out here have taken extreme measures to protect themselves from scavengers, booby traps, barbed wire fences, and worse. Have you had to deal with people trying to forcibly take your supplies? Walter and Helen share a glance. He nods slowly. Yes, a few times, though not as often as it might be in a more populated area. The worst incident happened about 5 months ago. A group of armed strangers came by at dusk. They must have spotted our generator lights. They threatened us, demanded everything we had. I was sure we were done for. Helen rubs her wrist, as if remembering a bruise. They pushed me around, started to rummage through our pantry. That's when a shot rang out. One of our neighbors. He'd hidden in the barn attic. We didn't even realize he was still around. We'd let him stay there for a while, and I suppose he'd been listening all along. He fired a warning shot into the air. Scared them off, at least enough for them to think twice. Walter's eyes darken. We never saw our neighbor again. He vanished the next day. We think he might have been afraid we'd blame him for attracting trouble. Or maybe he went looking for safer pastures. There's no real closure out here. As if sensing the somber turn, Bailey stands by the door and lets out a muted whine. I decide it might be wise to step out onto the porch for some fresh air. Walter and Helen follow, carrying the can of corn and picking at the kernels with what looks like bittersweet enjoyment. Their orchard, once brimming with fruit, I imagine, has only a few surviving apple trees with stunted growth. The rest is overgrown. I click on the recorder again, wanting to capture the setting's quiet heaviness. Walter points to the overgrown field. We tried to harvest everything we could last autumn. The yields were low. Between drought and a lack of proper maintenance, the fields just didn't produce like they used to. We also lost seeds. We can't keep the greenhouse going without consistent fuel for the generator, and that's running low. We're living on borrowed time, I guess. Helen nods. I remember when these rows were full of crops. Families from town would come for pick-your-own weekends. Kids laughed, running down the aisles. It was such a simple, happy time. Hard to believe that was only a couple of years ago. She sighs, and for a moment it looks like tears might come, but they don't. Instead, she stands straighter. We're still here, she says, as if reminding herself. We're still fighting for that last harvest. Time slips by as we talk. The sun sinks low on the horizon, painting the sky with bands of orange and pink. The farmhouse's shadows stretch across the yard like dark fingers. Walter throws a cautious glance at the gate. Sunset soon, he murmurs. We should go inside, lock up. A sense of tension ripples through my stomach. Nights are never kind out in the open. Too many unknowns, too few lights. I'm accustomed to sleeping under scraps of tarpaulin with Bailey curled at my side, but the Millers are clearly set on caution. I speak up softly. It might be better if I camp somewhere nearby, so I don't intrude on your space. Helen shakes her head. No, you can stay in the living room. We've got an old sleeping bag in the closet. It's safer behind locked doors. I hesitate. I'm a stranger after all, but they've shown me nothing but wary kindness. I appreciate that. We gather around a small table as darkness envelops the farm. They share a bit of their remaining oatmeal, bolstered with powdered milk from my stash. It's not exactly a feast, but the warmth and the sense of companionship make it feel like something special. In the lantern light, Walter and Helen look older than they probably are, the lines on their faces etched deep by worry and grief. Still, there's a flicker of resilience there. What are your plans going forward? I ask once we've finished eating. Can you keep the farm running indefinitely? Walter shakes his head. Doubtful. Without reliable seeds or a steady supply of fertilizer, we're at the mercy of poor soil. We're living off whatever canned goods we have left, plus a handful of vegetables from a small patch we keep near the porch. Might last us another month or two, if we're careful. Helen looks at Walter, then at me. We've talked about leaving, but where would we go? The highways are dangerous, the towns are empty, and the zombies still wander. This farm, it's home, it's all we know. Their words hang in the air. The sense of looming finality is palpable. I turn off the recorder. Sometimes you don't need to capture every single word. Some things are better left in silence. Later, as the three of us settle in for the evening, I hear the distinct rasp of wind through the fields. Bailey lifts her head, ears alert. Then a muffled noise from somewhere near the barn. Walter motions for me to stay quiet. He grabs a flashlight, and we slip out onto the porch. The moon is bright enough to cast pale shapes over the farmyard. The barn doors creak in the breeze, half open. Bailey stands at my side, a soft growl in her throat. My heart pounds. Could be scavengers, could be infected, or it could be just the wind. Walter's flashlight cuts a weak beam through the darkness. For a tense moment, I think I see a figure shifting behind the barn. But when the light passes over that spot, there's nothing but rusted farm equipment and overturned buckets. We exchange nervous glances, but there's no immediate threat to confront. After a few more minutes of uneasy watching, we retreat indoors, barring the door behind us. The miller's living room is cramped with my gear added to their existing clutter. I unfurl the old sleeping bag. Bailey circles twice before lying down, muzzle resting near my hand. Helen and Walter linger, both looking like they have something more to say. Helen breaks the silence. Riley, if you do manage to make it somewhere safe, will you pass on a message to anyone who might still be listening? Tell them the Millers of Oakview Lane stayed here as long as they could, that we tried to help but lost our way when it got too dangerous. Walter lays a gentle hand on her arm. We're not giving up yet, he murmurs, though his voice lacks conviction. I press the record button on my cassette one last time for the evening. I'll do that. And if I make it to a place with any sort of community, I'll share your story. People deserve to know how ordinary folks tried to keep living. A beat of silence follows, and then I switch the recorder off. We bid each other a quiet goodnight and they retreat to their bedroom. I wake to the faint glow of dawn and the sound of Bailey scratching at the door. A quick peek outside reveals a gentle mist hovering over the fields. The world looks peaceful in these first moments of sunlight, but I know appearances can be misleading. Helen steps into the living room, hair disheveled from sleep. She offers me a weak smile. You heading out this morning? I nod, gathering my gear. I think so. Thank you for letting me stay. I know how precious trust is nowadays. She glances toward the hallway, where Walter is presumably waking up. We appreciate the supplies you shared, and we're glad someone is at least trying to keep a record. Walter emerges soon after. We walk outside, where he shows me the property line, pointing to a back road that eventually meets the main highway. I sense an unspoken farewell in the air. Before leaving, I open my bag again. I have a small container of dried beans, enough for a couple more meals, if carefully rationed. It's a risk for me to let it go, but seeing the desperation in their eyes, I can't leave without offering a final gift. Take this, I say. It's not much, but it could help get you through the next few weeks. Walter's brow furrows with gratitude. You sure you can spare it? I'll manage. Besides, I can't do my job if I don't have people around who can share their stories. I'm trying to keep as many of us going as possible. Helen's hands tighten around the container, tears shining in her eyes. She starts to say something, but words fail her. Instead, she just nods. I sling my pack over my shoulder and give a gentle whistle to Bailey. She trots to my side, tail low. Together, we make our way down the path, back toward the broken gate. The early morning sunlight catches the farmhouse in a soft glow, highlighting every boarded window and peeling paint strip. I let my gaze linger on the windmill, which sways a little more each day, threatening to collapse. As I step onto the road, I can still hear the faint hum of the generator from behind the house. It resonates like a final defiant heartbeat against the stillness. Walter and Helen stand on the porch, their silhouettes framed by the golden light. They don't wave, they just watch, perhaps uncertain if they'll ever see another living soul approach their home again. Once we're far enough away that the house is just a speck behind us, I find a relatively open patch of road. I kneel down, pressing the cassette recorder's button. This is Riley Hart, signing off on tape 14. The Millers. They're people who tried to hold on to a small corner of the old world when everything else fell apart. Their farm might provide them a little while longer, but I can sense they know time is running short. They've shown remarkable kindness, despite being burned before by strangers. I hope they can survive the coming weeks, or even the coming year. But out here, nothing is guaranteed. If anyone ever finds these tapes, remember the Millers of Oakview Lane. Remember that they persisted, even when the world offered them every reason to give up. I'll keep moving, keep searching for others with stories to share. The dog and I will manage somehow. Even now, I believe it's important that someone, somewhere, knows how we lived, and how we struggled, when everything changed. I tuck the recorder away, feeling the slight weight of it in my bag. Bailey waits patiently, ears perked. We turn back to the road ahead, uncertain of what we might find as we continue our journey into the distance. The wind rustles the tall grass as we begin walking. I can hear birds calling from tangled hedgerows, their songs at odds with the memory of lonely nights. My mind is heavy with the miller's predicament, the guilt they carry, the seeds they can't properly tend. A part of me wonders if I should come back, try to help them with whatever I can. But I need to keep searching. There are more stories out there, more survivors living on the edge, more truths to record. The farmland gradually recedes behind me, swallowed by the horizon. The day stretches on and the future remains unclear, an unfolding path of both danger and faint possibility. But the story is still being written, one cassette at a time. End of tape 14, the farmstead's last harvest. The sun continues to rise, illuminating the endless road. What lies beyond is impossible to predict. For now I walk forward, the recorder safely stowed, my dog at my side, and the miller's words echoing in my mind like a promise and a warning. Thank you for listening. If this story sent shivers down your spine, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps this channel alive. Until next time, stay vigilant and remember, curiosity can be quite the companion, and sometimes a curse.